Hello. Today I'm going to talk about theater and its implementation into analog horror. Put simply, analog horror is an individual or small group project focused on low-budget, experiential horror. The main aspects of analog horror is that it is low-budget, community-driven, and developed by one or just a couple people. There's often a hidden story in analog horror that the community has to discover and piece together as a team. What really stands out to me about analog horror is the fact that it is low budget and most of the times individually produced. The reason this stands out to me is the fact that theater is no longer on the streets if you don't have a budget to rent out a space. It can now be in the digital space and all over the internet for anyone to see at any time. There has never been a more easy and accessible way to access people's individual pieces of art and theater. What makes analog horror special to me is that it injects the audience with ideas that are truly terrifying and not just relying on cheap jump scares often found in major blockbusters today. There's an impressive amount of creativity put behind the big analog horrors as they create communities out of thin air and develop an experience for everyone to go through together in real time. You can make an entire piece of analog horror just on your phone today. What might make your piece of analog horror stand out more than the rest, in my opinion, is your idea of what horror truly is and your ability to write a story. Those two things draw in an audience and allow them to watch and experience it the same way a performer would on the street about 10 or 15 years ago. In order to succeed in analog horror, there has to be a creative element that brings in people and forces them to ask questions and talk about it and think about it well beyond the fact of just the time they watched it. If I were to give advice to someone who was looking on starting their own piece of analog horror, I would say play on the senses. What I mean by that is that the senses we have are often subconscious and that we pick up on them, but we just choose to ignore them. Probably the most explicit example is that of the uncanny valley. That is when you see a face or another part of the human body that just doesn't quite seem right and is a little distorted and it freaks you out, but you just can't quite place your finger on it in a way that is absolutely certain to you. I truly believe that the best elements of fear out there is analog horror, often just found on YouTube by random channels and by random people creating it because they were bored one day and just wanted to have some fun. The best example of modern analog horror, in my opinion, is the Mandela catalog found on YouTube. There are deep, unsettling ideas that present themselves in that series that rely on the uncanny valley and twisted ideas of humanity's history. I hope you enjoy the connections between theater and analog horror